I'm Jim.
And I'm David.
And this is the Practical Guitarist Podcast, the podcast for people who eat, sleep, and breathe guitar. The Practical Guitarist Podcast is brought to you by Great Lakes Guitar Pickups. Great Lakes Guitar Pickups provides fantasy tones at prices a practical guitarist will love. Featuring top-notch construction, attention to detail, and a fully custom product, if you can dream it, Great Lakes Guitar Pickups can probably build it. Follow them on Facebook at facebook.com/Great Lakes Guitar Pickups. Are you a regular listener? Why not? David here reminding you of all the ways you can participate in the Practical Guitarist Podcast. Subscribe using your chosen podcast app. Review us on iTunes, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, or Google Play. Find our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/practicalguitarist or on Twitter as @practguitarist. Support the show. Merchandise is available in our Threadless store at practicalguitaristpodcast.threadless.com. And donate to us via Patreon, available at patreon.com/practicalguitarist. Reach out to us directly via email at questions@practicalguitarist.com. Hello, Jim.
Hi, David.
It is very early in the afternoon for a change.
It is.
Well, it's not early. It's 5:30, but it's significantly earlier than we normally record. So I woke up today and thought it was Father's Day. And my wife also thought it was Father's Day.
That's all right.
No, I missed the rehearsal over it, though.
The rehearsal. See, you did a good thing.
I didn't find out about it until noon, and I went, what? My wife said it to me, and it took like 4 or 5 seconds to sink in. So, whole thing. Advertising retailers, stop sending me your Father's Day this Sunday kind of messages a week in advance.
I know, right?
Start on Monday, please. So
first of all, it's a made-up holiday.
I know.
Nobody cares.
I like it when the kids do things for me.
It's like Father's
cook
Day.
And clean and don't treat me like crap. It's nice when they don't treat me like crap. That's wonderful. I really appreciate that. Well, my kids are great.
One day of the year.
One of my kids, I think, is in the room right now. They're great. So I got no complaints there. But so I spent the morning kind of like getting prepared for the Gear Fest stuff and setting up camera equipment and testing things and charging things up. And I made some last minute purchases of some camera equipment, but I don't even know if it was necessary. But it's going to be real cool. Like I have, I have stabilizer and all that now. So it'll look a lot better this year than it did last year. And we got some stuff planned. I mean, it's going to be fun. So Jim and I were just discussing how GearFest is going to work. And like the first thing he said, the first thing I'm doing is I'm going to the deal zone, which is like an area of tables where they have all the really crazy deals, like the $57 57s, SM57s and stuff like that. And I was like, no, don't worry about that stuff. They'll have that. Don't worry. I was like, if you really, I said, the first place you need to go is right out to the B stock tent and just charge through there as fast as you can to see what's there, because that's the stuff that gets picked over almost immediately.
You know what sucks? So I'm going there poor this year. I'm going there cash poor this year. So I'm probably not going to pick up much, but
get an increase in your gear card.
Yeah, that's just what I need. I know a certain listener who can tell you that sometimes increasing your gear card is not a good idea.
Yeah, me in fact can tell you that that's not a good idea. But I will be signing up for the Sweetwater Gear Fest card just so I can get the discount they give. It goes along with it. If they do the 24 months 0 interest financing, I might do it, but I'm going to use it to do the 3 easy payments.
Yep.
And then I might, just so I can keep the money in the bank account longer. I mean, that's really the only reason to do it. Because if you think about it, then you make interest on it if the money's in the bank account. So, it's pennies, but
it's not even a penny. I don't think you'd have to spend a lot of money to make that worth a full penny.
Well, Jim, we've talked about some of the things I'm going to buy. which will remain a secret because it's going to be part of the show.
Yes,
but yeah, the I'm going to drop a lot more money than I thought I was. Let's just put it that way. And I'm not happy about it. I'm not excited about it. Actually, I'm borderline having ulcers and panic attacks over it. So yeah, and
well, you've already made step one towards it. That's the thing.
Well, yeah, because I've accepted it. Step one is acceptance.
Well, step one is acceptance. Step two is selling gear to get it.
Oh yeah, I have sold. What did I sell this week? I sold the Helix, right?
Yep.
Did I sell something else? Oh, I sold a computer last week. I mean, this week I'm selling. I sold my Helix. I'm selling a rack that's been collecting dust for a while. My katana head is not up yet, but I'm going to give a show listener first dibs on that. Somebody in particular. And then after that, like I'm out of things to sell other than the guitars that are already up on Reverb, and I'm not taking like huge deals on those.
Right.
I did make a counter offer to a guy on my SG for $880, but I could have shipped that, and I probably would have still been over 900. Which is not 9,000, but it's 900, and no Super CN for me.
Did he accept it?
Huh? He has not declined it yet, so there's still time. I kind of hope so, because then I can kind of get the ball rolling on my Kiesel. Actually, I said to my wife today that I would probably just order my Kiesel as soon as that sells, but I don't think I'm going to. I think I'm just going to stick the money in the bank account, and then I actually have like a separate bank account that I can stick it in to hold on to, and that's probably what I'll do. Is just to keep it safe until I'm ready, because I'd like to have as much of that money as possible before that happens.
Right.
The other thing, I wanted to apologize to our show listener who won the Great Lakes guitar pickups. He knows who he is.
Oh my God, you're still holding on to him?
I meant to send them last week, and I didn't have time because my wife was actually out of town last week, and I'm gonna try to go after this episode and see if I can stick them in the post office. Just so I can get him out of here, because I need to get in his hands. It was one of the Worley people, wasn't it, who won him? I have to look at I got it in notes. I got it written down. But yeah, so if you're waiting for Great Lakes pickups, there's a very good chance they haven't sent them to you yet. No, by the time you hear this, they should be on their way. So, and you'll know about it, because I'll send you a private message and we'll have a conversation about it. Fine.
I have not posted, but I got the Telecaster pickups for this one. And our intention is to demo them with Nick Bonders, the guy who built them. Yeah. So we're going to demo them at the Sweetwater thing as a get-together. So they'll be in that Telecaster right there behind me. And
I want to hear them through everybody's rig that's there.
Yeah. So it'll be cool that you'll hear several hands. You'll hear at least Dave, myself, and Nick, Tom Bongers, possibly Gavin Kish. So that's going to be a group of people clicking away at them. And the other thing is that then we'll take them out and we'll do a giveaway. Maybe we'll pick a winner while we're there. Who knows?
Ideally.
Ideally, we could pull a name out of our hat. Why should I pull a rabbit out of my hat? Again?
I pull rabbits out of other places, but that's only because I'm a little uncouth.
Yeah.
Anyway, Jim knows that my mouth is probably fouler than most human beings. I wasn't in the Navy, but I could keep up with you.
I don't know.
Try me.
Where's your last time in Mexico?
You probably have heard the exotic 4-letter words that I may not know about yet.
That is true.
So, anyway, I got the opportunity. I've been going to Guitar Center on these like weekly pilgrimages just to pillage what they have either new or used that I haven't seen before or haven't played through a lot. And when I was in there yesterday, I played a 5150, the 5153, the EL34 version.
Okay.
50 watts. That thing sounds pretty good. I got to sit and tweak it long enough that I could kind of get some sounds out of it. I was digging the blue channel. Like it's got a green, blue, and a red channel, if I'm not mistaken. And I believe the blue channel is supposed to be the bluesy channel, which is like wild crunch, right? And I wasn't pushing the gain on it. The funny part was I went to the gain channel and I had the gain at like 9 o'clock or lower.
Right.
Because I'm used to the Mark V. The Mark V has gobs of gain, but they don't let it get to the point where it's like oversaturated, like the 5150 gets like at around noon. So for me, it's like just touch the gain knob and I'm good. Like I don't really need more than that. Exactly. And the other thing I got to try, which I mentioned, I saw one in there a couple weeks ago, and I just didn't have the heart to make the Guitar Center employees fiddle with it. I tried the Kemper.
So how'd you like it?
So the Kemper itself, the head, because they had the power head, right? It's like $2,200 for the power head. The first thing that we had a problem with, because I actually did have the heart to ask a Guitar Center employee to come and like, come over here and look at this. And so he comes over and he tries to help me set it up. And he couldn't figure out how to do it. So I pull up the manual on my phone and I kind of coax him through the process and we get it set up and we get some sound out of it. And so my first reaction was, God, this thing sounds dark, because it was plugged into an orange 2x12. And that I will say that is not the right cabinet for that amp for sure, but probably not the right cabinet for it. And I'm going to piss some people off, but orange cabs, they're not my friend. I think they suck. I have never seen a cab that can swallow up your treble frequencies faster than an orange cab can. And the bass is like, have you ever seen one of those people who, no, I'm not going to go there. I don't want to do that. Let's talk about, a deflated basketball.
A Kemper does, I'm sorry, an orange does this to the sound.
That's, to me,
it does. It does. But the low end sounds like a deflated basketball. Like it just sounds flabby and like overdone. Like it's been beat with a rubber hose or something to that extent.
Yep.
So, all right. So here's the thing. The Kemper, it sounds good. Like it sounds just as good as the Helix and I'm sure the Axe FX. I have very limited experience with Axe FX. I played one for like 30 seconds one time. The Kemper interface is dated. It's 7 years old now, and it shows it. I will say that the one that I was using was crashing while I was using it. Scroll backwards in the presets far enough, and all of a sudden it would go, freak out! And then it would have this thing on the menu that says, take a picture of this error code and send it to Kemper. Now, I've since been told that error message is actually a result of they shipped out some firmware on the latest run, and some of them have a corrupted patch. So basically, Kemper says just reset the factory settings, which should correct the issue. Which I could have done, didn't know how at the time. Now I know how. So it's a null issue at this point. But so I have a couple of things that terrify me about owning something like a Kemper, right? 600-watt power amp. Now, the guys in the store are first going, well, it's solid state. I don't care whether it's solid state or not. If it pumps out 600 watts, you can blow a cab with it easily. Okay? Now, theoretically, if you keep it dialed back, you should be fine as long as it's the proper ohm rating. But you got to be sensible with it. You got to know your limitations, because if you hit that thing hard enough, you're going to blow the speaker cab you're running it through. Even a 4x12 in some cases doesn't have a 600-watt handling capacity.
No, typically a 4x12 is about 110 watts, 120 watts.
Well, the logic behind the 600 watts is that you're going to run it into a PA cab and then powered PA cab, right? But there's merit to that, right?
I'm going to say something about the 600 watts. So one has to remember there's two things that are going to be involved in the 600 watts. when a system says it's 600 watts or 1,000 watts or 10,000 watts for that, first of all, 9 times out of 10, they're not talking about RMS, although they're supposed to be. So that's 600 watts, probably the peak.
Well, and that's fine. 600 watts peak can blow up your cab. Here's what you're getting at, though, is you're talking about tube compression and wattage. It's totally different than solid state wattage.
Right. And I'm going to say this about cabinets. You're not going to be emulating, so it's not going to do a wider frequency band because you're not going to be doing cab emulation. When you send 600 watts to an FRFR, you're telling that FRFR style PA cab, hey, I need you to take 600 watts of broad frequency band. When you send it to a guitar cab, you be sending a much smaller frequency band, because what happens is the cabinet, I shouldn't even say frequency band, the cabinet creates that band of frequency. And the cabinet also creates the push and pull against the amplifier. Now, I'm not saying you can't blow it up. I'm certainly not going to say you can't blow it up with 600 watts. And the smart thing to do with something like that would be to turn it down, bring it up slowly until you get to a point that you're not going to blow things up. But make sure, number one, the cabinet emulation is off, which you should be doing anyway. Otherwise, it's going to sound like crap. Then you're going to say, wow.
Unless you're plugged into a PA cab. If you're
Right.
plugged into a PA cab, you need it on. But that limited frequency band thing doesn't have anything to do with how much power it's putting out, really. It might have to do with how it's going to sound. But if you're hitting, so as far as the speaker's concerned, it doesn't care whether it's low-end watts or high-end watts. If you're exceeding the speaker specification, you're going to blow the voice coil, or you're going to rip the cone. Like,
Right, but I've maxed out a 100-watt cab into a 100-watt amp into a 30-watt speaker.
Yeah, you can do that.
Yeah.
Because typically the speaker handling is actually higher than its rating, but they're telling you they're not warrantying it beyond that rate.
Correct.
And a lot of it has to do with, like, so how long did you let the voice coil cook for? And, like, I know it sounds ridiculous, but there's a lot of factors that go into that.
Yeah.
And but I can tell you, I've been Googling around, and I found some people who've actually blown up their cabs to the Kemper before. So
I'm sure they have. And
it's not.
saying,
I'm just saying that their purpose for putting that power amp in is not really to drive a guitar cab. They can act like that's the general purpose of it, but the real purpose of it was to drive a PA cab, which is fine. Like, I just wish they would come out and say, you know what, we really don't want people to drive guitar cabs with this, or put selectable wattage on the damn thing. Like,
well, so Mission Engineering creates a 2x12 slant cab that's meant for the Kemper.
how many watts?
And what's that? How many watts?
wattage?
It's only rated for 200 watts.
Right. That's a problem. And it just comes down to the fact that, like, to get 600 watts power handling, you're going to need some significant beef in the speaker.
I'm just saying it's built for it. When I was talking about the wattage over large, okay, so how do I explain it? If I'm trying to push a PA cab to have bass frequency response, the PA cab needs more wattage to get that bass low end.
Yeah, because you're trying to move the cone. But let's say you do the same thing. If you send 1,000 watts to a horn that's rated at 300 watts, it doesn't care what frequency it is. It's just power. It's raw power.
Correct.
That's why they don't give you, like, 50 volt or 50 watts at this frequency. Like, that doesn't make any difference to them.
Right.
It's go ahead.
It does speak somewhat to the. I want to say two things. Number one, that does speak somewhat to the old don't play a bass through a guitar amp type thing. And it also speaks somewhat to the fact that Mission Engineering, who let's face it, when they build their stuff to you can bet your rear end that Mission Engineering cab will handle the Kemper.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure it will. But even the Kemper manual says, listen for the cone cry. You want to be able to hear those speakers start to crap out, and that's how you know, stop. Don't do this. And I think that's ridiculous because I'm like, you should just be able to go into the software and tell it, I only want to put out 100 watts.
Right. And I was talking about that with the intelligence. I'm saying, they should have some intelligence to say, oh, you know what? I'm not doing CAD emulation. Ergo, I don't want to push that much wattage. Now,
with regards to what we were talking about just now, when I was talking about like speaker handling, I'm not talking about the cones, right? Like the cone will have some different impact based on like whether it's a bass frequency that goes through it, and that's why people say don't plug a bass amp into or a bass into a guitar amp or vice, like that, not vice versa, because that obviously the cones on bass speakers are significantly heavier, but that's one way to blow up a speaker. But the more common way is to fry the voice coil because you put too much power through it. And you do that, the speaker's done. Like you can't even have it reconed.
Yeah, you need a new speaker.
Yeah, so that's what I was getting at. So for folks at home, like I wasn't disagreeing with Jim on the whole situation. Like I get that. I just don't like the whole part about the voice coil frying. It doesn't care whether it's bass or treble. All it cares about is how much heat is that generating.
Right.
Does that make sense?
And all I'm saying is I can bet that, there's always somebody who it's happened to me, everybody. It's happened to me. And then once my cousin, I had 3 cousins that happened to them because it's always happened to somebody. So I'm just saying that if you'd heard of Kempers blowing stuff up, you would not see as many of them on the road as you do. So there is a certain amount of intelligence. You could blow your own amp up without anything extra. You could blow your guitar amp up. I'm not saying I will do it, but you can do it.
So what's the which cabinet are we talking about? Are you talking about the KM212?
KM212P, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and you can tell that that's clearly designed with the Kemper in mind. Yep. But you know what's weird is the expression pedal for the Kemper says Kemper expression pedal. Like it's like they had a deal with them. Like they have the Line 6 expression pedal as well. Which kind of makes me wonder if Kemper didn't officially sign off on this.
Yeah, well,
do you know what I mean? Like
they put KM and P in the naming convention.
Well, there's a big reason why Mission wouldn't have signed off too, because Kemper's got their own cabinets coming out.
Exactly. And as a matter of fact, I know they announced them at NAMM, so I don't know if they're out yet.
No, they're not. Yeah. In fact, the only people that knows where they're going to be out is Kemper. So I did because in light of this episode, I went and read up. But so here's the thing. Kemper's not for everybody, right? Like and I don't want to poo-poo the Helix and say, hey, the Helix is not a professional level tool. I owned one for 2 years. Like it is definitely a good modeler. It does certain things better than others. And what I'll say is this: it does effects in general way better than the Kemper. But I think most players who are worth their salt kind of don't need, and I'm not trying to insult people who do rely on effects because we all know there's David Gilmours and stuff like that out there. But I'm saying like most players don't really rely on the effects as much. They might find a little bit more value in Kemper. And I think if you're like the Helix is a direct competitor with Axe Effects. I don't think Kemper has a competing product. I really don't. I think it does its own thing. I know a lot of people like, oh, it's a modeler. I for one thing, yes, it's a modeler, but not in the same way. So the other ones are component modelers. The Kemper is not a component modeler. All right. And that's for better or worse. I'm not going to comment too much on Kemper's functionality. You've all heard about it. Like, you know how it works. But I will say this, the modeling in it's good. It's not it's not going to redefine the world good, but it's good enough for professional use, and that's why it's in the hands of people like Mark Knopfler right now. So long story short, Kemper's cool. I mean, I'd gig with one. I'd buy one like someday. I think I'd wait until the next version, to be honest with you. I want to see what happens because the thing's been around for like ever now, 7 years or whatever, 8 years. And they're still upgrading firmware. They're still supporting the product, but I got to imagine there's going to be a Kemper 2 at some point.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they probably slipped in some upgrades, such as sometimes when you can't buy this component or that component because it's been phased out by the company that built it, you got to buy a new one. If you buy a PlayStation 4 today, it's not the same PlayStation 4 as I have. It's got a new, thing, but it's still PlayStation 4 and things still low enough.
With this being a digital product, I mean, they could conceivably just use modern parts, apply the software to modern parts.
Exactly.
That's not super hard.
Right. And so all I'm saying is like, we were just talking about the Mission Engineering guitar cab. The Mission Engineering guitar cab is actually, it's kind of a misnomer because it's not a guitar cab. It's a speaker that is tuned for modelers. The Kemper, like what you were talking about, the Kemper does what they call a profile, not a model.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's a model. It's the same shit. It's a pencil is a pencil is a pencil, kind of deal.
I know that, but what I'm talking about is that it models. I guess the way it does it is different.
Yes, definitely component modeling versus sound modeling.
Right. You can't take a Helix and go, you know what? I'm going to model my amp that I have right here.
No, not the Helix, but you could do it with the XFX.
Yeah. You can take a Kemper and model that amp that's sitting there.
Yeah.
Right, or an XFX.
Well, the XFX, so that's the thing. The XFX has tone match, right? Which is it uses an internal model and then it tweaks it to sound like the amp that you tone match.
Yes.
Now, I've heard tone match stuff, and it's not bad, but it doesn't sound as good as the original source. It doesn't sound like the original source. Whereas the Kemper, I mean, I got to be honest with you, like it sounds as close as you're going to get to the original source in digital, right? Like it's pretty ridiculous how close it can get. But I just feel like, excuse me. I just feel like there's some better. It's still I keep coming back to the price, man. Like $2,200 without the foot controller, right? So the foot controller adds another $400.
Yep.
And I mean, I could buy a Triple Crown from Mesa and a cab for $2,600.
Correct.
Now, I'm not going to have 10 amps in the Triple Crown, but at the same time, it's like I get full control over the EQs, and because that's the one thing the Kemper, that video I sent you today, the guy talking about it, he's talking about the EQ controls actually functioning more like a board EQ on the microphone itself, not the amp. And that's a good distinction. So if you're comfortable in a studio environment, I think the Kemper might actually work out better for you than buying a Triple Crown and, that whole side of things. Now, I've used a Triple Crown as a reference because it's a typical head in a typical cabinet type situation. But end of day, right? It's $2,600. It's German. It's well engineered. It's solid. I that was the one thing that always kind of freaked me out when I see them. It's like it looks like it's plastic. It is not plastic. It is metal construction. It's well laid out and well thought out. So if you're interested in Kemper, you can ask me questions in the group or whatever. I'm going to kill this segment for now.
Well, can I say one thing before you get done?
Sure.
I think the objective, whether you're looking at a Kemper, an XFX, or a Line 6 Helix, the objective is a completely different thing as to somebody who walks out and says, you know what, I'm getting a Triple Crown. Because the Triple Crown will do the best Triple Crown.
Right.
No profile, none, that exists on this planet or another will be a better Triple Crown than the Triple Crown.
Well, that's a terrible example that I used because there are versatile amps out there. I could buy a Rivera, right? And that's going to give me Marshall and Fender and potentially Vox, because if you've used a Rivera, the Ninja Boost can get you into Voxy territory as well. So, I mean, there are versatile amps out there. If you have, because let's be honest, Jim, we've talked about this before. Most guys only need 4 sounds. They need a high gain sound. They need a JCM 800. They need a Plexi, and they need a Fender combo.
Yeah, well, that's what I was getting at is whether let's use the Rivera. Let's use whatever. No no profiler is going to be as good or the same as that thing. The profiler is for the person, kind of like me, who needs to be able to go out there and play country in 1 second, metal in another, punk in another, ska in another, and I've got to have those. Otherwise, for 3 hours, it's one thing to go see Rush. Rush is Rush for 3 hours,
right?
Right. Ghost is Ghost for 2 hours on stage. I have to be all of them. And I have to be able to go from the softest to the loudest to the most driven to the least, all in one set. So,
yeah, I know.
That's what it's kind of made.
We've talked about this before, though, too. Like, I kind of feel like people overdo that shit. Like, I feel like people get really stuck on the idea of like matching the tone of the original recording. I think if you get in the family of sounds, you'll get by.
And that's the other side of it. There's always that side of it. What I'm trying to say, without I may not be saying enough.
I know you're playing devil's advocate too, so
yeah, is that I'm saying that if I'm going to play David, all right, if I'm going to a bar, which is a much more intimate location than say a 10,000 seat arena. Okay, and I've got to go from song to song to song. The listener, I'm going to make the listener tired by listening to a small band of frequencies versus a much, or tones, let's call them tones, versus a much larger, wider band of tones. So that's all I'm trying to say is that it gives you that palette, it gives you that wide and broad range of things. I'm not saying that I would spend, I'm not that person. I'm too gosh darn lazy. I spent an hour and a half building 6 patches, or actually 12. I'm sorry, 12 patches in my MS3, and I was like, oh, I'm so not wanting to do anymore. But I know I got to put together a couple more.
Can we talk about? I got a tandem topic.
Yeah.
You're talking about boring the listener, right? Yeah. So now this is where we're going to get into some acoustic science stuff, right? But I want to kind of back off and like look at that from a different perspective. So if you are concerned about the listener being we're not talking about being bored, because I know that's what you were kind of getting at. What I'm talking about specifically is fatigue on the ears. Yep. And that's been a complaint about modeling equipment, right? And actually some analog equipment as well, is that it's fatiguing on the ears. That after a certain period of time, your ears are like, I can't handle this. And that's really, it's really a function of 2.5K and above, certain frequencies that get boosted there. So a lot of people don't realize that you can just, EQ some of that out. And you may not cut the mix as well, perceivably, at first, but after people's ears warm up to it, they're going to be way more happy than if you were beaming them. I call it beaming when you have that thing that makes your ears hurt. But
yeah, I've talked about that before. When a band goes to 10, they don't care what that 10 is. When you go to 10 right out the gate, you've already worn your listeners out. And that's going to wear on people. I have I do that here. I'll sit, Marshall's sitting over here where you can't see it. I'll sit where I've got a certain thing going. Like I was doing it today. I was on the clean channel. And I was like, oh, that sounds really good, really. And then I went to I put it into the crunch channel. Then I went back to the clean channel. I was like, I can't even hear that. It's because that's what happens. So you have to give yourself a second to go, okay, it's not as low as I think it is. But it's like driving down the street. You're going along, right? And you're going 75 miles an hour to 65. And then you see a cop. You slow down to 65. And then you're like, wow, I cannot believe how slow I'm going. And because 65 is suddenly extremely slow. Or you're listening to the radio and you're going along, and you get to the store, you turn the radio off, get back in the car, you turn it back on, you're like, whoa, that is so loud. Who got in here and turned my radio up? It was fine 10 minutes ago when you went to the store. Well, if it's Walmart, it's an hour ago, but because they don't hire anybody to check you out. But, you know, you leave the store and it's like, oh my God, I can't believe I was listening to it this loudly. And that's what I'm talking about, that wearing. So it doesn't matter if it's volume, but it doesn't matter if it's frequency. But you're right about frequencies in that there are certain frequency bands, really low and really high. If you shelve them a little bit, you can save a little bit on the listener as well. So I don't know. Yeah. I made a decision that I'm buying a Kemper next year. So I've been looking at certain things and I went, you know what? I'm going to set myself.
You'll be more than happy with it. I think folks are looking at them like you need to still recognize it's not the same as owning the amps that are in it and that you buy for it. But I mean, they'll give you close enough approximations that you'll be happy. So we had
$3,000. That's at least
it's pricey, man. Yeah. That's why I'm like, I don't know if I can. I mean, if I could even consider doing something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we've had private conversations about my financial situation, so you know what I'm talking about. But anyway, so we had a thread in a group, and I'm scrolling hard to find it that we wanted to talk about on the show.
Yeah, but we don't want to point anybody out.
No one specifically. Yeah, well.
But if you read the thread, if you do a search for the thread, go.
Yeah, you'll know who said it. So this listener says, just out of curiosity, how do you all personally define practical as it relates to gear? And he goes on, there's more to it than that. And it was a good discussion because I think a lot of people in here had some really insightful ways of defining practical as it relates to guitar playing. But I wanted to, so I went off and had a novel, right? And I wanted to read some of that and just kind of define exactly what I was getting at when I said it. So I posted the definition of practical, right? That was a big part of it. And practical as it is an adjective describing of or concerned with the actual doing or use of something rather than with theory and ideas, or of an idea, plan, or method likely to succeed or be effective in real circumstances, feasible, right? And so bear that in mind as I read some of this. So I said that practical has an accepted definition, right? And I said that this has all been addressed on our show before. I wasn't really sure why everyone thinks they're crazy or that we are crazy for having, $700 to $2,000 guitars when that's basically the mid-market now. A PRS, it's going to be better than a Squire Bullet, right? I mean, and that was my response was yes. Is someone going to argue for the Squire every day? Does it matter on stage? Probably, but that depends on the player. Definitely covered that on the show. Should it being a Squire Bullet impact a buying decision? Yes. If you play out and need something that will last without turd polishing, no. If you're going to buy it and let it collect dust in your basement, this has been covered on the show. Does used value have anything to do with a guitar being good? Absolutely not. This also has been on this show. Does it matter where a guitar comes from? Nope, but it can affect craftsmanship and wood selection, as many players assume guitars from Indonesia are terrible, and the brands getting court to build them don't want to fight an uphill quality control battle. This has been on the show, and yes, it has multiple times. And I've owned several court guitars, so that's a big part of it. In fact, I still own several court guitars. Does anyone really believe you can pick up a new guitar for $100 and have it compete with a guitar costing $3,000 without putting a ton of work into it? I know I certainly don't. Can you take a $99 guitar and make it as good as a $1,000 guitar? Depends. Do you think wood matters? How much money do you want to sink into it? Because it's going to cost you at least $600 in 20 plus hours. I know because I've completely gutted guitars. And we've done this on the show. See any of our episodes about the Shingse. Does anyone believe that a $3,000 guitar is necessary for weekend warrior gigs? I sure hope not. This has been covered on the show in probably a quarter of our episodes. Does anyone realize that I've only ever owned 4 USA guitars, and they were all sub $2,000? Does anyone realize that I've owned 19 guitars or some absurd number like that? Clearly, there isn't a bias here. Like, I like inexpensive guitars. I just don't like them as much as the nicer stuff that I've been able to save up and get. And actually, the inexpensive guitars have been the bridge for me to get to the expensive stuff. So, like, I'll get a bunch of them, and then I'll sell them all, and then I'll buy something nice. So, you know, that's basically what happens. Like, you play long enough, you accumulate gear, and you can flip that gear into things that you really want. You just got to not form attachments to the gear that you're playing, which is tricky. Like, to be honest with you, it's tricky. I know people who have attachments to guitars that are, for lack of a better word, valueless. So I wanted to make it clear that we've covered a lot of this on the show before. Like, the show is focused on our definition of practical, which is essentially our show is focused not so much on the amateur guitar player as much as the pro-am, meaning the people that are actually like getting out and gigging, or like have the money to get some decent stuff, and they're going to use it for something. That's not to say that bedroom players don't have a voice in our community or on our show, but it's just that that's not where the market's focused either. Like, if the market were focused there, Fender would have a lot more money wrapped up in the Squire series, promoting and producing them. But I think what really goes on is that they want bedroom players to buy the $3,000 guitar. And that's a big part of it, because we know there are more bedroom players than there are pro-ams. Like, there's got to be. That's just from my experience walking around. Like, you go to work and you guys like, you say, oh, you play guitar? You know, you ever had one of those conversations where somebody's like, oh, I didn't know you played guitar. And you're like, yeah. And then I've been playing for like 2 years. And you're like, okay. You know, you're like, yeah, okay. But that happens a lot. And there's a lot of them out there. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with being a bedroom player, or even, you know, aspiring to be a gigging musician. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. But our point is that we focus on practical, which means in practice. And that's a big part of this.
Right.
So there were some great opinions shared in here other than mine too. Go back to the top here. So Paul talks about, Paul Pickley, he talks about supporting his son through his musical journey. Finding the best places to spend money is very important to him. And that's a big part of what's being practical, is like knowing when it's appropriate to do this. Because, like, for example, and I've been impractical, right? I bought $800 overdrive pedals and stupid stuff like that. And you quickly find out what's important to you. Like, look at me. I bought a Helix, right? 2 years ago when the show started. I bought the Helix with the intention of replacing my pedal board. I had it for 2 years, and then I realized I don't even need this many effects. Like, this is really not doing a whole lot for me. And I would rather have a couple of effects that are really high quality than have every effect under the sun. So I just got to make sure that whatever product I get has the stuff I need in it, and that's it. That's why I sold my Helix, by the way, folks, is I'm looking at other products that can do a similar thing and provide me similar functionality for less money that don't have every bell and whistle under the sun in it. So that's a big part of it. And I'm probably going to walk away from the Stomp as well, the Helix Stomp, because I know a lot of people are really into that thing. I look at that thing and see how limited it is, and I know that will be a problem for me. It's a great competitor for the Eventide H9. I will say that, but I think the Eventide has a leg up on certain things in there too. I think the delays in the Helix are a little weak, and I think the reverbs are far weaker than the delays. Which is funny because Line 6 has always been good at delay. So, nevertheless, practical as it relates to this show, practical as it relates to people, it's really a kind of double-edged sword. So I'm going to go on and I'm going to talk about some of these other people. It's like Ian Wood says that the one thing that you don't hear of often is a podcast called the Budget Guitarist Podcast. And he says that he's just started a journey into pedals. and he's looked up the prices of some of the name ones and thought, nope, I can't justify that. So he's been buying Chinese pedals. And I went on to respond because I was like, no, that's certainly valid. And actually, the Chinese pedals are great, but there are outlets where people talk about budget stuff, right? But the problem is those outlets quickly turn into talking about more expensive stuff. And there's a reason for that, okay? Because I think a lot of the gear-related technical shows, like YouTube shows and podcasts, feature people who they're wanting to make money doing this, and there's no money from the Chinese companies like Joyo, like sponsoring your ads and all that. I mean, some people they've gotten away with it, but it's not like they don't have the marketing capital that somebody like a Fender or Boss has, or any of those companies. And even Boss doesn't have that crazy marketing capital in reality. But some of the bigger companies here in the States do. JHS is a classic example. He spends a lot of money on marketing. I have to imagine his product is not that, like, the cost of his product is really low because he spends an insane amount of money on marketing. I mean, he's got a YouTube channel where he posts a video like every week. It's crazy. And all of his products get this massive YouTube rollout treatment. And that costs money. I know people who do those videos, and they take in money to make those videos. So this whole idea that, these pedal companies are using YouTube as free promotion, it's BS. And money talks too. Like the companies that get their stuff out, and the ones that don't stay the same, right? And that's just the way of the world. So, I have had Joyo pedals. I had the vintage Tube Screamer thing that they make, and it was good. And actually, I was told it was noisy. I didn't think it was that much noisier than the other pedals I owned until I turned it up. When I would turn up the amp, like I could hear low-level background noise, more so when it was engaged than not. But I kind of have that problem with pretty much every overdrive pedal. So I can't think that that's because of the construction or whatever. And frankly, even the construction of these pedals, JHS uses the same construction methodology, right? They use surface mount components, spec'd, and then populated on a PC board by a machine, basically. And then they just heat the whole thing up, and everything's soldered in place, and it's done. And they QC it, and they ship it out. I know it's a generalization. I know I'm picking on JHS. That's fine. I don't mind picking on them. And Josh is a good guy. Like he seems pretty genuine. My wife thinks he's creepy as hell, but that's cool. We can live with that. Did you have anything you wanted to touch on, Jim? I know I've been talking for like 10 minutes straight here.
I think that I spoke a little bit to practicality when it came to the thing that we were just talking about.
Yeah, I mean, a Kemper is certainly a practical tool.
And it's right. It's practicality that comes along with, how much do you want to be able to do what you've got to do? Sometimes practicality comes down to physical. I know there's somebody in the group that uses light guitars because of their back. So that's a practicality. They don't want to have.
Hey, I'm in that same boat right now.
There are people who look at that practicality is the one amp that does one thing really well, one guitar that does one thing really well. There are those who will play a Telecaster through a Blues Junior or a Reverb or Deluxe and say that's it. Fender through Fender, and that's the best thing that's ever happened since sliced bread. There are those who say a Fender through a Marshall is the best thing, and so on and so forth. So their practicality is, I want what works for me in this situation, and that's what I think everybody's practicality is. And for some, it is a budget because practicality has to come down to, I've only got $500 and I don't have any more money than that. What am I going to do with that $500? And they don't have time, or they don't want to take time, whatever it is that makes it, that pushes them to say, okay, I'm going to spend this much money and I'm going to get this rig or this gear. So I know I'm rambling a little bit, but the fact is that practicality is different for every single person. I've talked about one of the things that I want to be able to do. And practicality will come down to having a very small rig with a very small number of guitars that goes into doing a lot. Let's look at the people who are professionals who play regularly. The folks that are on, say, American Idol or The Voice. They use live musicians, which I think is a great thing. You know, those shows could use tracks any day of the week, and they're still using live musicians. The Tonight Show, those things, they're still using live musicians. So those folks come in. They've got a rig that sits there. They've got a little rig in the practice room, and they've got another rig that's on the stage. Saturday Night Live band, and they're doing their things week to week to week to week. They've got to be able to cover a certain number of things, but you never really hear them worrying about, I've got to get this sound. We're going to do this song this week, which is a cover. 9 times out of the 10, they're playing 20 seconds or 18 seconds of a song that you've heard a million times over, but they play their version of it, right? So the practicality of it is, I've got to get what I can out of this little rig that I've got there. And they may have one, sometimes 2 guitars with them. And that's it. That's all they've got for that thing. There's also the road musician who's busking. And there are people who make a living busking. And what have they got? They've got a little, what is that, Roland? You can play, it's a cube or something that you can bring down to the subway, and it's loud enough.
Yeah, you're talking about the Katana Air.
Well, yeah, the Katana Air. There was a Roland product that
the cube. The little cube. Right.
Yeah, but all I'm saying is that they need it to be loud enough to be heard in frequencies that are good, but they also need to be able to sing over it, sometimes without any kind of PA whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There are those people. So I'm just saying, practicality comes in different flavors and different forms. We're trying to talk to those people who have different practicality. And you're right, we're not talking to the bedroom player who's never going to play in front of anybody, because the truth is they probably don't care about our show anyway. I mean,
they probably hate us. They're really going to hate us after the next topic.
Yeah, that's true.
Stick around, folks. We're going to annihilate some people and probably get in trouble.
We're going to make some people hate me.
Yeah, I want to separate myself from this one because this is all Jim. Okay, Jim's opinions do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Practical Guitarist podcast. For all hate mail inquiries, please see Jim Woodard.
That's right. That's absolutely right. You can send your hate mail directly to me.
Yeah, so we'll get there in a second. You're absolutely right. Practicality has a lot to do with the function, right? And that's something a lot of people miss. Like, and I miss it because I'm sitting here. I got a Mark V 25 sitting next to me, and I'm complaining because it's too loud for my condo. That's not practical, is it? It's not practical. What I should be doing is going direct with studio monitors and just being done with it. So, long story short, it is what it is. Like practicality. I don't want to give them. I do want to say one more thing about this thread that happened. Right. I don't want to give everybody the impression that I was angry with what was going on there. I was a little frustrated, but I was frustrated because I have been on both sides of that, right? So I've seen people that get mad at people who spend money on gear, and I've seen people who go the other way, who get mad at people who don't spend money on gear. And like, it's easy to be on one side of that fence. It's hard to be on the line. And I think that's what I try to do, is straddle that line, because I do recognize the stuff I have costs money. Like, I'm not going around flaunting it, but it's because I like it and I actually do use it. You know, it's not, if I wasn't the quality of player that I am, meaning I put in my 20 years, I've hit my 10,000 hours or whatever it is, like, I wouldn't be buying USA guitars. I've been playing guitar almost 15 years when I bought my first USA guitar. I think like 13 years. Think about that for a minute, though. Like, that's pretty significant. That should say something. Like, I don't really feel like you don't get the full benefit of having those guitars until you know how to use them properly. Case in point, I was at Guitar Center the other day checking out the Kemper, and there's a guy in the platinum room who had he had a No, I thought it was a Deluxe Rare. He had a Fender Twin on 5 with a King of Tone out front and a Telecaster running into the King of Tone, right? And he was shooting out custom shop Telecasters with an American, like the American Vintage or whatever, the one that's double bound, the one you liked, Jim, that you were talking about. And he asked my opinion. He said, "What do you think about this?" And he swapped, and I gave him my opinion. And it was basically one was meatier, the other was more treble heavy. And he did prefer the sound of the custom shop, but he didn't prefer it $1,500 better, which is very telling. And that's a practicality discussion where he said, "You know what? This isn't worth $1,500 more. It just isn't." And so he made a judgment call and said he wouldn't buy it. Really interesting conversation with that gentleman. He's local pro, and plays with a lot of names around here. And he was interested to hear the Kemper too. But his impression of the Kemper was totally different than mine. And that's because he comes from the old school. Plug into an amp, turn the controls, and you're ready to rock and roll. He's looking at me like trying to get this Kemper going, and he's like, "What? And why would anybody ever want something this complicated?" Then he heard it, and he was like, "Oh, it sounds awful." And it was because of the cab, right? It was all the cab. So he walked out of the room, went to the restroom, came back about 10 minutes later, walks back in. He goes, "Oh, it sounds much better now." And I said, "Yeah, it's the treble control." I goosed the treble. So, case in point, look, it's just different strokes for different folks. I think it has a lot to say about finance. You get the best that you can afford. You get the best that you can tell a difference in too. That's the big part of it. You can't tell the difference between the Squire and the Fender. You don't buy the Fender. If you can't tell the difference between the Fender and the Fender Custom Shop, you don't buy the Fender Custom Shop. Even if you do tell the difference, you kind of want to weigh like, is this worth $1,500? It's just like buying a car, folks. Everybody, I would assume that we probably do have some younger listeners who may not have bought a car, but I would assume that everybody who listens to the show has probably bought a car at some point, and everybody'd love to have a BMW. The question is it worth the extra cost and maintenance? So now we can turn it over.
You jumped on what I was about to say, and that is, so I used to recommend, well, I still do, but in a different way. I used to recommend, people their purchases, mostly in the IT department. So
I quit doing that a long time ago.
Yeah, I know, right? So back in the early days of building your own computers, people would come to me because really it was still a wild west of stuff that we were looking at.
Can you look at my specs and tell me if this is a good PC?
Exactly. And put yourself back in the 386 DX days, or SS, right? And people would ask me, what computer should I get? What computer should I get? Back then, it was pretty easy. It was buy what you can afford. Buy the biggest, baddest that you can afford. Because I said, if you can't put your own PC together, if you asked me to do it and I put it together, and then because back then you had drivers,
no warranty, drivers, all that.
Right. I said I could put you together a much faster machine for the same amount of money, but you're going to have to ask me, "Oh, something's going wrong. What should I do?" And back then, like I said, it was very different.
Back when you had to get the drivers on a floppy disk.
Exactly. And so I'd have to say, okay, now I got to go over to their house, and I'd have to put on a driver for their modem, and then I'd have to bring over a driver for their sound card. I'd have to bring over a driver for their video card.
Yeah, you couldn't even do it with it. You couldn't even do it with a thumb drive back then.
Yeah, because you didn't download drivers. They didn't go and download that. They just wanted something that could play Doom 2 on.
I can remember getting patches for games like Doom 2 on floppy disk.
Yeah. But now you've got, you get the same question when it comes to cell phones. Everybody thinks they've got to have the biggest, baddest cell phone. I got to have the fastest cell phone in the world. Like, so what are you doing with your cell phone? You're texting, you're taking some pictures, and you're emailing your mother. You don't need the baddest one. You need the one you can see well. So pick the screen that's most comfortable for you. But remember, as you're holding that one-handed, you've got to be able to text with it, and you've got to be able to use it. And so is it too heavy for your one hand? We've got a lot of people now. I mean, you got 12-year-olds with freaking carpal tunnel. Come on. But anyway,
I'm well on my way.
I'm going way down a path I don't need to go down. But well, the point is now with guitars, it's like, do I really need the biggest band? Do I need a Blue Sky, or do I need a?
Or can I get by with the Canyons?
Right, or can I get a Canyons, or can I just get the Boss?
Yeah, Boss RV8 or whatever.
Right. I don't need all that stuff, and so that's where you got to look at it. Which is going to lead us into our next discussion. And here, folks who play in praise and worship, please do not think I'm speaking of you. But today, specifically,
there is one person in particular we're speaking of that we will not name.
Right. I will not name this person, but David sent me personally. We were having an offline discussion personally. Okay. Because I'm going to go into a generic of this, but I'm going to pick on this one person who happens to be a praise and worship player. And then I'm going to go into a generic of what really got under my skin about this person. So this is a YouTube person, and he sent me this thing. And the first thing I thought was, oh my God, I just know this is a praise and worship player. I don't even need to be told. But of course, he's talking about his gigs and his setup. So I noticed several things. I noticed a bad haircut that he thinks is cool. And supple hands with a beautifully manicured nails. Okay, he's got 8, count them, 8 OCDs on a board. I don't know why you'd ever have 8.
He's going to demo them,
right? Lined on a board, but he's got 8 OCDs on a board
in the background, no less. Not like off to the side where he's going to grab them afterwards. No.
And he's got the most expensive guitars you can think of hanging from the wall. The one in his hand isn't a Fender Jaguar. It's a Shure Fender Jaguar knockoff because it's got to be nicer than an actual Fender Jaguar.
Yeah, it was a Shure.
Right, Jaguar. I'm not good with the Jaguar.
It's I think it was the Shure version of it. It was a Shure offset.
But it's an offset. That's the important thing, right? Earring, tattooed ring.
Some people are going to be trolling YouTube looking for this video.
Oh yeah. He was demoing a piece of gear. It doesn't matter what the piece of gear is. And I'm like, okay, praise and worship. Then he starts saying, yeah, my Sunday gigs, that's my Sunday. I'm like,
my Sunday gig.
And the thing I was getting at was this. I was like, you have got probably $40,000 in gear sitting in that room.
More than that.
Easily $40,000 in that room. Yeah, like you said, probably more. I'm being very conservative with that number. And you're showing off. Oh, I forgot the shorts. He literally took a pair of nice,
really, really nice Dockers
slacks and cut them and left the threads,
the frayed crap.
Come on. Cut the phrase up. You are not.
They weren't dad shorts. I'll give you that.
Yeah, and sandals. Okay, at least he didn't have socks on, but he had sandals. I'm like, and manicured toenails. Seriously, dude. All right, we get it. You are a praise and worship stereotype. You are the reason that I look at PW guitar players and I go, seriously, dude. Is there all that money? Are you truly giving, your tithe the way you say you are? And number 2, is that church if the church funded that church doesn't have better things to do with that much money? I mean, that's what people outside of the church see. That's what they see. They see the big amounts of money that the church spends on stuff, and they go, yeah, but there's still somebody hungry on the corner. So I'm just saying. And what I really want to get to is that the stereotypes. If you live the stereotype, back in the 90s, when the folks started following Nirvana, the stereotype was the Jaguar, or
the whatever offset.
Yep, they couldn't play a Telly or a Strat. They had to get an offset. They had to play simple stuff, and they had to wear. The thing I got was the wearing.
It's still a part of the hipster culture.
Yeah, the clothes of the hipster culture. Come on, You don't have to have a beard.
The
I have a beard
the
because
flannel.
Yeah, the flannel. That's exactly what I was trying to get at. The flannel, the jeans,
I personally, I listen to what you're saying, and like I kind of agree with
the
you.
punks did it. The punks did the same thing. I can't remember the shoes, the brand of shoes.
Converse.
They had to have a specific. Yeah, they were either Converse sneakers. It was a boot, not Docker.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
The boot, but they were like a black boot. All the punks had to have. All the punks had to have a hairdo that went like this. It was like you're living the stereotype. You could do other stuff.
I mean, the last thing I get concerned about is following fashion trends.
Yeah, I definitely know.
But here's the thing. So we see these people as being P-dubs, right? Now, there's a couple things we got to remember. Most of these worship leaders, who I've got friends who are actually worship leaders in different circles and things, are trying to present themselves in a way that's acceptable and or cool to young people. Because most of these guys are older than they look too. And that's something that I found that many of them are 10 years older than you think they are. And they want to appear like they fit into that community so that the 17, 18, 19-year-olds will be like, feel like they belong. And that's just part of the situation. But I think that what you're identifying as being these like P-dubs things are normally, they're just hipster culture in general. And like, it drives me crazy that hipster culture is driving the guitar market the way it is when there are probably more other people interested in guitar in a serious way than the quote unquote hipster culture. Because like we've talked about offsets on this show before. Offsets are a perfect example of like the fashion trends working their ways into guitars, because it's really born out of that like Sonic Youth, Nirvana momentum at that time. Before that, you could find those guitars for nothing in a pawn shop. As soon as that happened, those things skyrocketed, and it's because of the aesthetic appeal. Like, that's the way I look at it, and I think that a lot of those people don't actually appreciate the guitar for what it is. I do know some people who like offsets because they actually like offsets, like they like the guitar. But I know other people who are very image conscious and like extremely image conscious. And it's like, I wouldn't play that because I don't like the way it looks, or it's not cool to play that. And it's like, okay, fine. So you'll buy a Sir, which is known for playability. That whole thing, the Sir Jaguar or whatever that was, that cracked me up because I'm like, wait a minute. These guitars were known for not playing well. And then you bought a version that is strictly designed to play well. It's like you kind of defeated the purpose. It's like buying an airline that has a 14-inch radius and a double action truss rod, so it can be completely straight and flat, and you get it with stainless steel frets and leveled. Plecked. It just seems counterintuitive to me. So the fashion trends are one thing. Like, they drive me crazy. The super tight skinny jeans, the really expensive shoes, and the flannels, the beards. Like, I have facial hair, right? I was doing this before it was cool. I do it because I'm lazy and I don't want to shave. But that's the side from the point. That's why Jim has watched as this thing has gotten like longer and longer. I'm pretty sure that like Sasquatch is going to come out of here, and maybe at Gearfest he'll fight Man Squatch. Like, that's kind of what I'm hoping for. That the being that lives inside my beard will come out and shake hands with Greg Koch. It's a good game. So I don't know. Like, I don't really. I have a reaction to the fashion of it, but I know hipsters that are cool, like nice people. I don't immediately write people off when I see them like that. So I sent you that video because there was information in it, and I was laughing because of the OCDs. I'm like, seriously, That's like name dropping. Like that's what that is. Because he had every version of the OCD, like because there are 8 or 9 versions.
My only problem with the praise and worship, I have no problem with the praise and worship team having a really nice set of gear. They have to have a nice set of gear, especially in a larger church. We talked about the practicality. You got good sound. You got to have everything else, but don't flaunt it the way the guy did. Yet every pedal had to be in the shot. He could have been closer in the shot, but he didn't wind it up enough. And then he had to take guitars that truly should have been on stands and set them up against the wall so that they were in the shot. Look at all my guitars. No, oops, I got a couple that are hanging out of frame. Let me get them in here.
My reaction to that is he's not making those guitars from gear money, from church money. Those guitars. So either he's one of multiple people living in that house, his parents have money, or he's getting money from YouTube, and that's how he's buying all his gear.
That's a possibility. There are a lot of PW YouTube channels.
Or he makes money on gear in some way, and maybe not gear endorsements. Maybe he does tutorials or makes patches, or does impulse response models and sells them online. And oftentimes, a lot of guys that do the PW gig, like they do that because they like to do it, but they got a side gig, and that's where they make their money. And I didn't get that impression from him, but I already kind of have some forethought as to where that money is actually coming from, which we could talk about after the show. And like the money is one thing. So I don't like that either. I really don't like it when I see, because I've dealt with, in fact, I had this happen recently. I was at Guitar Center. I was buying a pair of headphones or something. And I was in the pro audio department, and there were guys from a church in front of me who were buying a PA. They'd been there twice in 2 days, right? And they were trying to buy like a $6,000 PA on a credit card, right? And they wanted their church approval. And the guy behind the counter was like, "We can't do that. You need a letter from your church." Well, we don't know what the letter's supposed to say. So then he breaks out the binder and he says, "Here's a sample copy. Take this to your church, have them sign it."
Right.
And they're like, "Well, we don't understand why we can't just get the church thing without them being here or whatever." And he's like, "That is state law. You have to have the person that has the license sign that document saying that they authorize this to be tax exempt." And it was a whole thing, but for a fact there are people that abuse that. Like a church could buy gear tax exempt, right, and then go sell it willy-nilly. They could sell it to their members and nobody would know. And so it would be like, "Well, I'll give it to you tax less," and you don't pay tax on it. I mean, yeah, the church is not going to make any money on that, but they're not losing any money either, are they? So I know somewhere out there is a church that is buying really expensive gear and letting their members buy it back from them to keep it because they don't want to store it, or they don't, for whatever reason. It doesn't matter. Maybe they're trying to be unscrupulous. Maybe they don't realize that's a tax problem, that's not something you should do. And that sucks, because I don't like to see anybody abusing the law in this country, because we have these laws and the people that abuse them are the ones that make things worse for everybody else. So I'm not going to get into the whole political discussion, but you know what I'm saying? So like, I totally understand, like, seeing somebody like that, and the initial gut reaction is all he does is play in church on Sunday. And like, he has the look of somebody that all he does is play in church on Sunday, but he may be part of a touring church band or something. And that may be a big part of that. Like, you probably remember some of the old school performers that used to get hired out to like travel around and as part of like a gospel show and whatnot. So, yeah,
well, I do remember the thing that gets me is because I do remember wearing spandex. And I mean, not a good thing. It's not, I don't think it's a good look for anybody. So I'm just saying that's where I'm talking about the generalization of the stereotypes as any stereotype.
Yeah.
I mean, there were people who would, dress a certain way, look a certain way, do a certain thing, all because it was part of that culture. And that was the reason they did it. They didn't do it because They felt that it was the right thing to do or the thing that they wanted to do. They did it because it's part of the culture.
Do you realize what my first, so like I was like probably 17, 18 years old when this happened. Might have been a little bit older. When I first had the realization that I didn't have to worry about like what people thought of what I did.
Yeah.
The first thing I did was I bought an iPod. Like that was because I was like, I'm not going to support Apple. Like, I don't want people to know that, I don't want people to think that I like Apple and like their products and everything. And then slowly and slowly, all of my friends started to get iPods. And I was like, what the hell is going on here? Like, why is this thing so good? I drew a line in the sand. I didn't get one for 2 years. I drew a line in the sand. And there's a reason I drew a line in the sand. And that was that the iPod was lossy, right? So it had MP3 and AAC. And I had MP3 files. I played MP3s on my computer. But I was always the guy that was like, they don't sound good to me. Like those files sound like garbage to me. And then one day I just said, you know what? I can't win this fight. And I bought an iPod. And that was when I realized, like, this is a great product. And I think that might have actually been one of their last truly great products. And I just remember thinking, like, what have I missed out on? Like, and for probably 10 years after that, I was just like completely agnostic to the whole idea of like being imaged or cultured in a specific way or being visible in a certain way, because I just didn't care anymore. I was like, well, I'm missing out. Like, there's other things I could be enjoying. And started to realize that, even just the idea of like drawing the line in the sand, as I had characterized it, becomes kind of silly. And it's like, if everybody's doing something, and I'm not saying that the herd mentality is good either, but there's probably something there worth talking about or worth looking at. So, the Helix, for example, everybody's buying the Helix right now. There's probably a reason for that. Like, everybody's bought deluxe reverbs over the years. We know there's a reason for that. I mean, it's a $400 giggable amp that sounds really good at the two things it does really well, which is get loud and sound like a Fender, and that's my thesis on this, is that when you see somebody that follows trends like that so closely, you kind of stop and you think to yourself, like, what is this dude missing out on? Subconsciously, I think you do. I think you go, like, why does this person not understand that you don't have to wear cutoff shorts? Like, you could wear shorts that don't have crap that hangs down and itches you all day long. You don't have to wear sandals. Like, you could go barefoot. If you're in your house, you don't have to show off your sandals or your moccasins. You could go barefoot, or you could put socks on, or, it's like, no one cares. And if you're going to do your guitar thing, you don't have to have a Jaguar. Like, I would actually be more interested in this guy doing a praise and worship kind of thing with like an ES335 or just something off the wall.
I'm going to devil's advocate my own statement, and that is that if I was doing a channel like that, where my income
now you're getting it
revolving around the look, the feel, and the audience participating because they felt that I was representing
them,
the product, as well. That's exactly what I was going to say, as well as the persons. Then I think that I probably would fall in line with that.
Bingo. That's exactly what a praise and worship leader thinks. And their goal is not money, right? Their goal is to get people interested in the spirit. So their whole thing is, how do I get, and usually they're like youth leaders too, like, how do I get the youth to look at me that way?
Correct.
And once you put it in that narrative, like, everything changes. However, it does not change my feelings on hipsters, because if you're not,
because hipsters have a choice.
Exactly. It's not even about choice, really. I mean, it's the fact that they just like follow trends. And I used to drive me nuts, right? So you'd have your conformists and you'd have your non-conformists. And I always laughed because I'm like, if you're a conformist, then you're just like everybody else. But if you're a nonconformist, you're just like everybody else in the negative, meaning you are conforming, except that you are choosing to do the exact opposite.
You're conforming
so really,
to the non-conforming.
You're not a true nonconformist until you see the path and you say, I'm going to do what's right for me. Screw you, and screw you on both sides.
Right.
Right. And so I encourage anybody who's listening to the show tonight, tell everybody, screw you tomorrow, and quit your job and go find what you want to do. No, don't actually do that. Don't actually do that, folks. But seriously though, think about how this relates to your guitar buying and guitar habits. Just because everybody jumps out and says this new pedal X is great, does it even fit your genre? Because like that, I've gotten into that where I'm like, oh, this is a great drive. Like this is, and I'm like, wait a minute, this doesn't do fusion. This doesn't do metal. Like, what am I buying this for? You know, and I think brand identities, and I'm covering my mouth, sorry. I think brand identities have a big portion of this to do with the fact that they pick these groups and work within these groups. Like brands like Zvex and JHS and Keeley and Wampler and all the rest of them kind of like pick a niche in the culture of that is guitar players, right? And they hammer that niche hard, right? So I think Wampler goes after like the pro-am dudes, right? Who want to have different amplifiers but really can't, so he makes these like amp in a box pedals. He's getting away from that though. He's doing a lot more professionally oriented stuff now. But like Robert Keeley goes after the modding crowd. Like a lot of his pedals are based on other pedals. And I feel like they're kind of like they're really firmly aimed at the modern interpretation of classic kind of crowd. But then you look at JHS. What did JHS's market? And I know people are going to poo-poo me for this. JHS's market is P-dubs, hardcore. If you don't think that, you've not been paying attention, because they very much like the way that they structure their videos. There's no dirt or grime anywhere to be seen. Like it's very squeaky clean. And I feel like the pedals themselves, the way they're laid out and stuff, is like an iconography that speaks to people that would be more interested in like religious iconography, like in the sense that, you know, it's like a tableau or something of that nature. Like there's some subconscious cues going on with that company that are very interesting. And I don't necessarily know that they're doing it on purpose, but it's something that they've gravitated towards, and this is their brand image, and so it fits this group, and this group is the people that buy them. Case in point, in that video, the guy's playing he's playing through his thing, and he's like, oh, you got to have a tube screamer, because it can't be P-dubs without a tube screamer, right? What did JHS just release? They released the Bonsai, which is every tube screamer in one box. Like, hello? I mean, the Supro, the Super Bolt, right? Supro pedal. Who do you think that was for? I get this very strong feeling that there's some that they're marketing towards that market. Now, should they? Yes, absolutely, because it's a big market. And I think that P-dubs has always been driving the sale of PA equipment and guitar equipment and organs and pianos. And this isn't changing. Like, this has been the case for the last 50 to 60 years. So these markets are very important markets. And I think it's crucial that these companies follow them. But I also get this weird taste in my mouth when I go to buy a JHS pedal, which I can't really say that because I've never bought a JHS pedal. I bought a JHS Boss pedal. But the point is, I feel weird about it because I'm like, I don't really fit their target market. Even though that shouldn't matter, I'm like, what are people going to think? Are they going to think I'm doing P-dubs now? Is that what this means? And do I care? Not a whole lot, but I mean, it just doesn't. It enters into the equation when I think about it. It's like, who's this geared towards? Because let's face it, my rig is not like what you'd find in a typical P-dubber's rig. That's, and that's what it boils down to. It's like if I had a Triple Crown, right? I'm not going to be buying a boost that's being used to push deluxe reverbs in worship houses. I'm going to buy something that's going to push a Marshall, you know? Not to say that Marshalls don't end up in houses of worship, but I'm just saying that like the typical iconography of that movement is like a clean fender, a Benson, a Milkman, or a Vox AC30, lots of Vox tones, matchless. And I want to be really clear. Like, I have a lot of friends who play P'd up gigs, so I'm not trying to poo-poo on these people. It's just easy to use that as a cultural group because they have a very clear like cultural stereotype already applied to them. And I think anybody, even the people that are members of that community, know that there is a cultural stereotype there. That's why we have memes where it's like, oh, these are proper pedal boarding shoes. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, you don't have that meme. Like, you might have some 80s hair metal memes, but like, you don't have memes for you do though. Like, I guess I just don't, since I don't really see myself fitting in with these other cultural groups, I keep forgetting that we have like dad rock and that we have like the flaming, flaming 50s shirt, like bowling shirt guy, like
that's what I was going to say. So what would be a stereotypical dad rocker? If you were to look at a band and go, dad rock, all you do is say, yep, guys over 50 or I guess.
No, I don't even think over 50. I think
40s. I think that somebody 42, 43.
Somebody who's older who's still holding on to the music of their youth.
Dad rocker.
Like really holding on to the music of their youth.
No, I mean if you were to walk into a club without hearing any music, like that guy today for me, I knew, P'd up. What would you say? Okay, yep, that's a dad rocker. I
would say he has to look like he's in his 40s at minimum. Button-up shirt, it's a big part of it. Slacks and/or jeans, and then like just comfortable shoes. Like a dude that doesn't really care. Like it's just like, all right, I play guitar, like no big deal. I think there's two types of dad rockers though. I think there are those guys, and I think there's the guys with like the cut off sleeves, and the cargo shorts, and the ankle socks with shorts kind of deal. And then they're the ones that go to the guitar store and they're like looking at the 80s metal guitars. Those are the ones that are like, yeah, like I want to be Satchel kind of. And it's because they're holding on to the music of their youth. That's what it is. I would consider that dad rock in a nutshell.
Let me ask you this.
Round and round. That's what they're going to sing later,
Yeah. And they're going to do it either in the original key badly, or they're going to tune it a full 4 steps down or so.
Yeah.
Now let's. How about you walk into a guitar clinic, right? And they're doing, doesn't matter what the guitar clinic is. Let's say we're going to be at. I was just going to say we're going to go through a bunch of them here shortly.
We're
going to go to Sweetwater. We should go like. Point at people and go, okay, that's a dad rocker, that's a P-dub,
that's a great idea.
And then ask them, what's the primary kind of music? So let's see if we because what would you say what a jazzer looks like? Would you say a jazzer is the guy with the like a little ponytail pulled in a little bit into the back, probably wearing dark clothes, and broody?
You know what we need to do? We need to go with signs, right? And we need to stand behind the sign, and it says, "Come over and talk to us." And then when they come over, we're going to have 3 questions, and we're going to have them define what is dad rock. Yeah. Like, can you explain to me what you think dad rock is?
Yeah.
And we'll preface it and be like, "Look, we're doing it for the show, but we want to, but like, let's get some actual like other interpretations of this stuff."
Yeah.
And then we need to set up some questions to ask industry people, like.
Yeah, I got a bunch.
What's your favorite? What's your desert island rig? Like, what's the one rig that the holy grail for you? Like, I think we can get some interesting like pizza questions. People like to ask like, what's your favorite pizza? I think we can come up with some actual guitar ones. People actually might care.
Some useful questions.
I don't know what podcast that was, but the last thing I care about is what is Paul Reed Smith's favorite pizza.
Just don't care.
Just don't care.
And it doesn't make a gosh darn bit of difference.
It's probably an East Coast pizza.
Their equipment is good. Yeah. what their equipment's going to be. It's not going to be a reflection of the gear that they make or sell.
Well, that's what I'm hoping to find is that like they make the gear because they understand it, but that isn't necessarily what drives them wild.
Right.
It's about market, right? And
absolutely.
That's my point. So hopefully we get to meet some interesting folks there and work through some of those questions.
Oh yeah.
If you're still on the fence about going to GearFest, I'm gonna give my little GearFest commercial. Even though they don't pay us, they don't sponsor this podcast. They don't even know we're going. Well, they do, but on a very basic level. I wanna do my little commercial, which is that if you have money sitting somewhere, and you can go and you can just drive up there in a day's drive, right? If you or like you can get up at like 5 o'clock in the morning, get in the car and drive to GearFest. Do it. If you've never gone, do it, because you will meet people that you will never have the opportunity to meet unless you go to a NAMM show, and you will see deals that you will never see outside of that kind of event on new gear. You will get to go to the flea market tent and see people all over the state of Indiana who have come down, and some from southern Wisconsin, and some from southern Michigan, and some from Ohio, and like it's just a great event, and there's lots of education. And that's the one thing that like I didn't get to take advantage of last year. So having double coverage here, I'm going to actually get to go sit in some of these sessions, which is going to make this really, really cool for me. Cause like that's some of the stuff I missed out on last year. So if you have the chance to go, come meet us. We'll be there. We'll be nice to you. I promise. I like to yell at the microphone, but I won't yell at you. I promise. I promise. I break promises, just so you know.
Yeah.
But I'll try not to break them. I'll probably yell at Jim at least one time while we're there.
He'll yell at me. He definitely will yell at me.
Yeah. Especially when he's like going to the grocery to get frozen food or something.
Oh yeah.
It's gonna happen. We're gonna be there like 3 days. It's gonna happen.
I have to go to the grocery.
Yeah, you're gonna get them frozen Papa John's.
Weight Watchers meals. Papa John's.
You and your Papa John's, man. Like you've had Papa John's probably 50 or 60 times, like before the show.
Yep.
We're on episode 120. That's like 120 something. That's like 50% of the time you're eating Papa John's before the show.
That's a terrible thing. I'll tell you that right now. Papa John's, it's a terrible thing.
It is. It's like the worst pizza on earth. Why are we talking about pizza? We don't care about pizza.
Hey, does pineapple belong on pizza? The answer is yes. I'm sorry, people. If you think their answer is no, you're wrong. I'm right. You're wrong. Goodbye.
I would rather flush your pineapple down the toilet. To be honest with you, pizza is about meat and cheese, mother. It's about meat and cheese, mothers. And if you like, I can't eat mushrooms. No. If it's meat or cheese, I'll eat it.
Oh, let me check my app. Okay, Papa John's.
No.
Says
no pineapple. Stop it.
Let's see what the special is this week.
We're not talking about pizza on this show. I'm going to have to cut all of this out.
Are they after P-doubles? P-dubbers? Let's figure this out. Okay, ready? Meaty barbecue pizza. Definitely after P-dubbers. P-dubbers don't eat pizza with pineapples.
Is it vegan?
It's a vegan pizza. a vegan.
Could you imagine, right?
Barbecue.
Think about that for a minute.
The barbecue pizza
some bread.
Special vegan. No, it's called meats, barbecue meats, or barbecue chicken and bacon pizza. I can dig that.
Pizza, sauce, bread, vegan pizza.
That's it. Sauce, bread, vegan pizza. Well, I mean, let's face it. Pizza is the perfect food because you can have fruit on it. You can get veggie pizza, or you know
how I feel about my hierarchies of tone, right?
You know what we'll have to do is I'll ask my friend. So I have a friend that lives. I won't mention his name on the podcast. But I have a friend who lives in Fort Wayne.
I'm glad he
and
lives.
I'll ask him specifically what's the best pizza place we can go to for pizza. Because we have a listener who we don't know if he asked to remain anonymous or not. We have to get good food because the listener sent us money to buy something good.
Yes, well, I know. We got Shigs and Pit.
So we gotta get something good. We're either gonna go get steak. You and I are gonna go get steaks, or we're gonna do
Shigs and Pit would be fine, but they also have the Hoppy Gnome, which is good too. I mean, like we'll find something. There's good stuff there.
There's a lot of fun places. I think we should do a karaoke night one night.
I'm going to be so exhausted. Like, you have no idea, man. You're like, this is an event that will wear you out.
I know. I have to drive 12 hours on the way back.
I know. That's why I'm like, you're like, oh, I'm going to go to karaoke night. Like, you're nuts.
We're going to do it once. We're going to do it once.
I don't sing.
You don't have to sing.
Actually, you're probably one of the like 4 people that I know that's heard me sing.
Yeah, see? I know you can sing because I've heard you do Hendrix and you can do it. I know.
Somebody's going to tell me I'm good.
How many of you guys need to hear David do his best? Matter of fact, even if we just do it at the house, we're going to have to jam out some Hendrix and you're going to have to sing it.
All right. But I get to have the lyrics in front of me.
That's fine. That's fine.
Okay.
You get to use a music stand. I'll bring a music stand.
I'll do it.
Okay.
I'm glad somebody's bringing a music stand. My car's going to be packed.
Dude,
let me give you like before we dial out here. Let me give you the lowdown on all the stuff that's going right. So my Mark V, the cabinet, which is a micro 1x12. I'm bringing in one guitar. I'm bringing the Kiesel. I'm bringing probably no pedals. I might bring pedals. I could probably bring because I can stick them in a box and it'll be really small. I'm bringing my camera equipment, which consists of 2 iPhones. My stabilizer, microphones. I'm bringing a box of microphones. I'm bringing my Zoom H6, right?
Yep.
And that's probably it.
I'm bringing that Telecaster.
I wasn't done yet.
Stratocaster. Oh, you said that's about it.
I'm it for me, but I'm driving down with Dan Kish.
Right.
He's bringing a 2x12 cab, a katana head, possibly 2 guitars. And we're putting this in the back of a Passat.
I'm bringing 2 guitars. Luckily, I have the whole car to myself. I'm bringing 2 guitars. I'm bringing the Marshall. I'm going to bring my pedal board, which is relatively simple. I'm bringing a microphone so that people can sing. I'm bringing a stand, music stand, microphone stand. I think I said
you're going to bring. Oh, that's right. You're bringing.
I'm going to bring a little PA thing. Yep. So we're going to be able to play around and have some fun. I'm bringing the Alto with 2,000 watts of power.
That should be plenty for us.
Yeah.
Although I don't know.
And I'll bring a speaker stand because we're going to get it up in the air. We're going to be able to hear it. I'm not going to put it on the floor.
We'll see how loud my rig is after.
So you better bring a camera thing. I'll bring the camera. Don't let me forget.
I'll bring a tripod.
Tripod, yeah.
I have a man-sized tripod, and it's a little bit taller than you are, Jim.
Yeah. Oh, and I'm bringing because I'm a little bit shorter than man.
I'm only 2 inches taller than you.
I know. I'm only 5'7", guys. I'm bringing my Focusrite and my laptop and this microphone so we can do our live cast.
The podcast I'm recording with this.
Oh, cool.
So.
We can do it that way.
I can run an aux out. I mean, that's no big deal.
That's good. We can record the jams with that too.
That's what I was planning to do.
And I'll bring some jump we used to call them jump drives, some flash drives, so that
I have a bunch of them.
Get you to give me a copy of that stuff so I can hear it, play it back because this is gonna be hilarity.
Yeah, it's gonna be a frat house for like 2 days.
Yep. Loud, obnoxious
until 11 o'clock.
The only thing different about the frat house, I was going to say, there's only 2 things that would be different about the frat house. Number one, there'll probably be maybe 3 or 4 beers flowing instead of
30 or 40.
And there will be no pot, and people will be in bed by 11.
and no sorority girls will be in the house. So
yeah, there will be none of that here.
Yeah, I mean, we got Tom Bonners, right? It's going to be.
I think we're all a bunch of married men, right?
Sure. Yeah, we're all married.
Yeah.
So except for Kish is technically not married, but he's basically married. So yeah. All right. This has been a long episode.
It has been.
I have been David.
I've been Jim.
And we've been the Practical Guitarists.
Yes, we have.
Sure. I'll turn this off anytime. Sometime soon. When? When am I going to turn this off? I'm going to turn it off.